We will be live.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're live. We are live. And come on, stream. There we go.
Be weird sans Daryl, but
Yep.
we'll make it.
Well, once he gets his internet, just in general, then he'll be able to come back on.
Is that really why he's not here? Because internet?
Yeah.
I
So
love
we
it.
were playing Battlefield 4 on Sunday, and then he just dropped like out of the call, out of the game, out of nowhere.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and we're like, oh, I guess we should back out and wait for him. And we waited like maybe 20 minutes, and then he got back on somehow. And he's like, yeah, my internet's like all over the place right now. And then I was talking to him today. He called me, and he's like, yeah, my internet's just gone. It just doesn't work. So
Dang.
Just it don't work.
Has he called anybody, or is he just? Oh, the
yeah,
internet's out.
He's fixing it himself. He's
well, I mean, that's what he said he was trying to do, and I was like, well, yeah, I mean, you could. But the problem is he's also been working so much lately, so he doesn't have time. So
Right. Troubleshoot.
excuse me. So until he gets that fixed, hopefully it won't take longer than a week.
Yeah.
It'll just be us. So, which sucks because he did recommend this movie. So we watched Falling Down. Oh well, actually, let me introduce us. It's been so long since I've properly introduced us.
Oh, I forget.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Like This podcast. This is Dana and I'm joined by myself, Dana Waters, Ben Nickerson, Jeremy Dallas, and Doug Waters, and we're gonna be talking about Falling Down. So this is a pretty obscure movie. I don't think a lot of people know about this movie. Did you guys know about this before? I know you have, Doug.
Yeah. I actually knew about this movie because the Foo Fighters made a whole music video like based on this.
Yeah.
movie.
oh really?
Oh, I didn't even know that.
And I was
Isn't there
like,
another movie that is the same exact premise called Going Postal or something like that?
Probably
yes.
that's based on a game.
Yeah.
But
It's similar.
I think
Yeah.
there's been a few homages, shall we say? Kind of.
Yeah, it
to the
seems like it's a bit of a cult classic. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's fair
I
to
would-
say it's
I'd
sort of
probably
in
call
the
it
cult
yeah,
classic realm.
it's from 1993. So
You know?
We did not do Twilight.
And yeah, after I watched that Foo Fighters music video, it's for Walk, I was like, this seems like it's all out of a movie. And so I looked it up. Like everything that's
It is.
happening in the thing is like it's too linear. I was like, this
Right.
got to be like from something, you know. And then I looked it up and I found out this is the movie they based it off of. But it's
Interesting.
really, I had never actually seen it until today.
It's a good movie. It's
Yeah.
a bit weird. I will. There is a movie. Speaking of movies that are very similar, there's a movie called Rampage, which is the only good Yui Bowl movie. But it has a very similar concept to it, but it's a lot darker because the guy actually goes out and specifically kills people. It's not as fun of a watch. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy.
Yeah.
This guy is a guy. You know, I don't feel like
It's
he's-
like the whole movie is actually so strange because it's like trying to touch on something, I think,
Yeah.
that like it's trying to like catch the like frustration of the working class like middle-aged white guy. It feels like it's like
not really. I mean, it's if you know the time period, this is a couple of years after the Cold War was over.
right.
And so a lot of these people, like in defense, were losing their jobs and becoming his character represents the obsolescence of the defensive contractor and others
Mm-hmm.
that with the death of the Cold War were finding themselves I don't want to say useless, but obsolete.
right because he specifically
and the-
talks about that in the movie.
Yeah, he
right?
says
And
that
if
I'm
you look
obsolete,
at
yeah.
how he interacts with certain characters, him being white sort of, I mean, there's a point to it, but it's not the central point. Because I mean, if you look at it as it starts, you might think that, well, it's because he's racist. But then you see like the army surplus store guy who truly is a racist,
Right.
and you watch their conversation, and the Michael Douglas character, the William Foster character, doesn't understand his racism or his viewpoint at all.
Yeah.
No,
And so
Right.
the
No,
char-
I don't think
like
that
I said,
he's supposed to
the
be
character overall just
supremacist or anything.
represents uh, obsolescence, and it's not necessarily of the white guy.
So I mean, the reason I said a white guy is just because like he's clearly like from that class. There's a black dude who's talking about being economically not economically viable
Oh,
as
right.
well.
Yeah,
Which I think they were trying to demonstrate is like it's not specifically just this guy's a white guy. But I think the main thing about the frustrations that this dude is feeling, a lot of the things that set him off, I think, are like everyday frustrations. You know,
Yeah, that's
like
kind of the point. Yeah.
God damn it, just like, can you be a human and like sell me this Coke for 50 cents so I can afford the payphone? It's the only damn reason I'm buying the Coke. Or God damn it, I'm hot and my air conditioning doesn't work and my window won't roll down and I'm in traffic. Or like, no, fucking listen to what I'm saying. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm just in this situation. Like, don't treat me like it's like I mean, it's literally just like a comedy of errors that this guy is experiencing on his way
Right.
to his estranged wife. Which are all just like the problems that he's experiencing are very first worldy, and there's a humor in the fact that these things are setting him off so much that he's like going down this path that's getting worse and worse for him, I think.
yeah. I think like stuff like I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it more later, but like stuff like the breakfast that
Whammy
stopped getting
burger.
served like
Yeah.
15 minutes late, and he's like pulls out a gun and he's like, well, you know what, I'm sorry, right? It's like
Yeah.
I think everyone at some point was like, this is the most extreme, like when you're really hangry or you're really in a bad mood, you're like,
This is what people say that they wish they could do, right? Like, oh man, I wish I could just
right? Like, oh, you know what,
That's
I'm
what I was
sorry.
force
saying.
these people to make me breakfast.
That's
and then-
at
Sorry,
least
yeah.
part of the reason for the character is
Mhm.
that you can understand if you take each one of the situations he goes through. I think at least to a certain extent you can understand his reasoning of getting upset. It's his reactions that normal folk are like, okay, this is a little extreme. And like you said, there are certain situations you go into Whammy Burger or something like that, and they stop serving breakfast. You'd love to pull a gun and go, hey, I want breakfast, give me breakfast.
Give me my breakfast.
And then he changes his
Yeah.
mind and wants a Whammy Burger anyway. So
Right. And then he
Um,
gets mad because it doesn't look like the picture. I mean, like,
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and I think the movie just honestly, to make the character relatable, because we're following him for so long, I think they give him these things to set him off that are very clearly like, yes, we've all been frustrated, and they really hit the nail on the head at the very end of the movie with the other middle-aged white guy who's leaving his job and like feels obsolete and gets made fun of at work, who's like, look, bud, you're not fucking special. Like, the only thing that makes you, I think he says the only thing that makes you special is that little girl over there talking about his daughter. And it's like, yeah, I feel like that was a pretty smart way to kind of wrap it up. It's like, yes, dude, everybody fucking feels this way, but like nobody but you is going around being a fucking asshole, shooting up the place.
Mhm.
We're all dealing with it. Look, everybody lies. We lie to the fish. I love that fucking last thing. And I
Yeah.
feel like it really touches on like the fact that it's mediocrity that's really bothering this guy. And you talked about the obsolescence of the specific time period that he's like facing. But I love that, like, yeah, sure, fucking go off and be crazy, but like just know that like it doesn't make you special or anything. It's just kind of like you're being an asshole.
Yeah, I think we
Right.
get that as viewers too, right? Because we've been in a lot of these situations that this guy's been in. Again, like even that part where he blows up the construction site with the rocket launcher. He's like, "What are you guys fixing?" And he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
I love that.
And then he finally gets him to the point where he's like, "The street's not broken. Like we're just filling our budget, so we
Yeah,
can all get paid still." And it's like it's stuff like that. And really just touching on those everyday things. I mean, it's constant. But the thing that I really like about it though is you can sympathize with the guy, but from like the beginning, he's not the good guy. Like the way that he handles all this stuff, he's never the protagonist ever.
Yeah.
So they do a good job of setting up Prendergast as the actual protagonist because he's kind of like the guy who gets picked on at work. He's retiring. He's getting picked on at home. But you like him and his the detective that he works with. And so you like their kind of like
I think that
Yeah.
they're foils to each other, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
like,
very
they're-
specifically. They even meet each other in the beginning of the movie and they don't even know.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
they both get they both get out of their car at the same time.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that Prendergast really knew that guy was that Foster actually got out of his car. Prendergast just gets out of his car for some reason. I think he sees the cop motorcycle or
Right.
something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that whole interaction. I mean, it's pretty classic, like cat and mouse sort of cop movie style, but the context of the movie is very interesting because this dude is just like
Just
going
losing it.
fucking nuts. Yeah, he's just
Mhm.
losing his goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Which I liked it. I liked the experience of, you know, seeing this dude vent his frustration. But at the end of the day, I mean, you realize that he has really, like, he's definitely unwell. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they do a
They
good
don't
job of
make that
showing
a-
it too. Sorry, Jared, what were you gonna say?
Mhm. I was gonna say they really kind of they pace themselves with that because at the beginning of the movie, there's a lot that you don't know. Like I've known of this movie for a long time, so I had a general idea about it. But a couple things snuck up on me. One is that this guy's like really unwell. He's not just having a bad day today.
right.
As the movie goes on, you actually, right, as Robert Duvall's character starts learning more and more about this guy, you actually find out this dude's like been unwell. Like this guy's
Mhm.
actually been unwell for some time now. You see, he's living with his mom. His mom's like terrified of him,
Right.
and so
He hasn't
you
worked in a month.
kind of
Yeah, I mean, he lost his job. He's not telling anybody. He's
Mhm.
not telling his mom. He's not telling
Right.
anybody.
Mhm.
He's going to work, taking his
Oh,
briefcase,
yeah.
putting his lunch in it, and going who knows where.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, but
That's
you
what he's
you
doing.
guys
then
have heard about
driving
stories
home
about
as
this.
if he had been at work,
Mhm.
and his mom the whole time thinks he's at work. And
Mhm.
then of course
Yeah.
you see what I find interesting is towards the end is he's watching those home movies of him, his wife, and his child, and you see clearly that he's agitated, but even back then is these
Mhm.
little
Right.
things like his daughter not liking the horse he got her and for her birthday, one of her past birthdays and so forth, is kind of you're seeing that buildup of okay, now we can see that this has been coming a long time, and
Right.
we're seeing the day he gets out of his car. Okay, the first scene you see, you know, it's hot, there's honking, there's construction, you know, there's just all this loud noises, and you think that's what snapped him. But as we go along, you see there are a number of things for a very long time.
Mhm.
I would
Yeah,
say
and that's what I
at
didn't
least a
expect
year
about
or
this movie.
more.
Because
Um,
I went in thinking, oh, it's a classic story about a guy who has one bad day and that just leads to a snowball thing. Not really. This dude's kind of wacko already,
Right.
and so that was kind of interesting the way they sort of they feed that info to you.
And they make you
Oh.
question it too. I mean, there's like
Mhm.
the whole thing with the I feel like they nailed the time period pretty well with the way that people interact with each other in a very in a very inappropriate way compared to today.
It's definitely LA, right? It's like
Mhm.
definitely
Yeah.
downtown LA.
But specifically when the cops are like, okay, like this guy's coming to get you. Has he ever hurt you before? And she's like, well, no. And I feel like, you know, the whole, first of all, obviously, like cops not believing victims of like abuse or whatever. It's like, yeah, this has been a problem. Like, I get this. This definitely is like, you know, some pension of reality, but also like plot wise, it's like, well, now I, as like the viewer, am questioning like, well, maybe he, like what is he really gonna do? Like, is he really so bad? Like, you know, when he gets there, like, do the cops really need to be around? Like, they definitely toy around with the idea that like he hasn't really done anything so bad, and like he hasn't even robbed anybody or anything like that. Like, he's not using
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
power that he is suddenly captured for evil. He's just like on his way home. And
Mhm.
so the pacing of it is like very interesting in terms of like he doesn't even fight he doesn't even hurt anybody until he is like specifically provoked when
Right.
he's interacting with the gang members. I mean, you could argue that he hurt the convenience store owner, but I think he was more just like taking that back from him and then like upset at the price of things. you know, which is very
Yeah.
relatable. You know, I think especially back then, 85-cent soda, like obviously sodas are much more expensive now. So I think the idea of being like, this is all fucking bullshit is probably kind of cathartic for people that are just like upset with the inflation, you know.
Yeah. That when it's like, well, how much is the aspirin? He was about to say $5, and he goes, $4.29. and, the dude, and he's like,
Too
not
high,
even
too
close.
much, too much. Well,
Everything on this shelf is suspicious, and he fucking snaps.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this movie is interesting too because they actually shot it right around the time that the riots were going on in 1992. So
Oh, the
it
Rodney
was.
King riots.
So I was watching this part where, and at this time, this is when a lot of Korean convenience stores are being targeted by rioters for whatever fucking reason. And so it was really weird to watch that scene, like knowing the context of history at the time. And I was just like, "Oh, that's kind of spicy," because that was happening like before even the movie released. So
Yeah,
very interesting.
I tell you, yeah, those a lot of those Korean store owners had a little bit more than baseball bats. when those
Oh yeah, they
riots
had like
started happening.
rifles. Yeah, and they would hang out on the roof. Mm-hmm.
47. Yep.
Call them the rooftop Koreans.
Yeah, it was fucking insane. It's like a
Yeah.
That
war
was, I mean, it
ground.
was definitely a serious time historically.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, the whole thing is interesting. I feel like it really does kind of capture the spirit of LA in the 90s. And it's hard to watch something that's older and see, you know, the way that people treat each other, which we like, you know, socially, I think there's probably been some progress.
Yeah.
But like the whole the way that they handle the interactions feels kind of more authentic and less just like kind of in your face, like, oh, who, like, let's be politically incorrect or whatever, right? Like
Right.
the scene where the guy's like, you understand what he's saying? And he's like, I'm fucking Japanese, dude. This dude's Korean. Like, are you
Yeah.
fucking serious? This is your last day, and like you don't even know that they're fucking Japanese.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing, it feels more authentic and less just like racist, which I think makes the movie itself kind of hold up a lot better than other
That's a good
90s
point.
movies that kind of tread over that. And you kind of just have to be like, well, it was a different time. This is like, it was a different time. And like, it's kind of authentic. It's earnest. It's not just like offensive.
Right,
Which
right.
I think is just a sign, honestly, of good writing more so than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
They
the
pay
interesting.
attention to the Sorry, my mic fell. I feel like they have a good attention to detail in this movie. Little
Yeah.
stuff like that. You know. Were you gonna say, Dan?
One thing that a lot of people picked up on and critics as well is that it's not about like kind of like what Doug was saying earlier. It's not really about him being a racist or really race in general. It's sprinkled in here and in there, but it's really just kind of like a sign of the times. Like that's kind of what was going on in LA at the time. I really like that part in the beginning though too, where he's got the bat and he's sitting down on that rubble or whatever the fuck it is in the middle of the empty lot with nothing around, and his two gangbangers go up to him and are like, "You're on private property, man." He's like, "I don't see any signs." I thought like even making fun of like gangbangers and stuff like that, and it's like how they just kind of like claim land because they say it's theirs. You know, it's like how ridiculous that is, and
Well,
they play on
yeah,
that
like-
and like
Yeah, I like what he says after that too. He's like, "All right, clearly this is some kind of gangland thing, and you know, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't want you in my backyard either."
Yeah, that it's like just like straight. Yeah, I mean, straight back at them, right?
Yeah. He's like,
Uh,
he's like, I don't see a sign. The dude's like, what's that? And he's like, well, maybe if it was written in fucking English.
mhm,
yeah, that whole
But
thing.
that stuff's funny.
yeah.
I love that interaction.
But there's a couple of things too where like I really like that interaction with the Korean convenience store owner, where he's like, "You know how much money we gave you guys during the Cold War or whatever, the Korean War?" And he's like, "No, how much?" And he's like, I don't know. Well, it was a lot, okay? And he like doesn't know.
Well, the
It's like-
Korean
it's
store
funny.
owner,
It's just
the
like
Mr. Lee has a much better reaction to that because he's
Mhm.
again, it's one of those things where it's like I appreciate the way they handle these situations because Mr. Lee, like they're having an altercation, and
Yeah.
he's like, you know how much money we gave you during the Korean War, and Mr. Lee's like, how much? Like he says it like super snarky, like why
Right.
didn't you tell
like it's
me,
been
white
used against him
guy?" Like,
before. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like he's had this
Mhm.
conversation with people before. He knows how to talk to people about like about where he comes from and stuff. Which is, I mean, it's just it's nice. It's nice to see like that it's not just I don't know, super in one direction or the other. Like clearly
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are able to back themselves up. And I think that just kind of informs that, yeah, it's not really about race, but to set something in LA in the 90s and have it be authentic, like it's just going to be part of the conversation. A white
there's groups
dude
of people
with
in
a
there.
white shirt and a tie in gangland. What the hell is
Well,
he doing
and
there?
I think that's one of the reasons why the character is white, is he stands out
Everywhere he
Walking through-
goes.
everywhere he goes. He walks through these different parts, whether it be the Korean store, the gang members territory, or whatever. Is even when he's walking through the golf course,
Mhm.
he
Right.
stands out.
Even when he's
Yeah,
in the army surplus store, he's wearing a
Exactly. And I think
white collar
a white
tee
shirt
and
and a
his
tie.
tie with everybody else looking for military surplus clothing. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the
So,
whole
and I think
Yeah.
that's the main point of the character, is he does stand out everywhere he goes.
Pretty
no
much.
except
matter
for
what
inside the
situation.
police station. The police station, everybody is wearing white shirts and ties. It seems like,
And
He
they
doesn't
point
go
that
to
out
the
too.
Police station.
right, he doesn't
which
go
I
to
thought
the
was
police
funny.
station. But yeah, I love that line where the fucking captain picks up a duffel bag and he's like, "Are you gonna arrest me?" Because he's
Mhm.
wearing a white shirt with a tie and
Right.
holding a duffel bag.
Mhm.
And just like talking about how ridiculously nondescript that actually is. But it it is interesting. There's almost an element of like one of our own needs to be like reined in,
Right.
just from this, like, just from like the way they dress all the characters,
Mhm.
which is really fascinating. But I think that it is ultimately kind of a Joker-ish style of story where it's just kind of,
That's
you know,
what
this
I
guy's got
noticed.
like a mental health problem.
That's a
Yeah,
good
I
way to
actually
put it.
noticed that I rented this movie on YouTube.
Oh,
I mean, you
Wow.
can rent it anywhere, but that's just where I chose to rent it today. And there's a comment section, like when you rent movies, like
Oh.
it's still
oh, that's kind of.
I never thought about
Yeah.
that. That's
That's
it's
genius.
kinda
really
neat,
interesting
Oh,
because
shit.
you rent these movies through YouTube, but there's still a full-blown comment section and likes
Huh.
and dislikes, like a video, you know,
Huh.
like a regular video. And I actually read through the comment section because I was really curious.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people were saying is like, oh, this feels like that Joker movie. You know,
Hmm.
it's
Mhm.
I forget what they called it, but that they actually had a term for it. I thought that was a good comparison because it is kind of like him, right? I mean, they're both sort of mentally unstable. They both sort of have a couple pinnacle flip out moments.
Mhm.
There's a lot of, this movie is generally pretty lighthearted. Funny
Yeah, I
enough,
would say
Joker is
so,
like
yeah.
depressing, kind of start to finish. Joker is a tough watch.
Yeah.
Doug, I don't know if you actually ever did end up seeing Joker.
No, I haven't. I didn't get around to seeing it.
It's
but,
not
It's
an
a good
easy
movie.
movie to sit through,
Mm.
but it's a
Still
good movie.
good.
It's just
Mhm.
it's just
Yeah,
an
and
emotionally
this-
taxing one.
Yeah, this one did manage to stay kind of funny sometimes.
Mhm.
Well, actually, funny a lot of the time. Yeah, they make it like, I think what you said is cathartic. That's a good way of putting it. You know, the viewer really feels the frustration of that Michael Douglas character. 'Cause
Mhm.
the Joker, I mean, it's true. You know, he does. I think you feel his frustration sometimes when he's being like ostracized and
Oh, absolutely.
all
yeah.
that kind of thing, but it's in a more like legit, like angry way. Whereas this one's funny. Like Whammy Burger is funny.
Yeah.
Like that's hilarious. The 85-cent Coke is funny.
Mhm.
You know, like all that stuff's
Or
just
when
great.
that kid showing him how to use the rocket launcher.
Right.
That was pretty
Yeah,
funny.
Yeah,
Oh
I mean,
my
that's
God, that's
clearly just
hilarious.
slapstick
That's great.
comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he
Yeah.
misfires the rocket and it goes up the sewer, and then there's like a beat, and they look at each other and they're like, "What happened?" And then it explodes, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh!" Like it's literally just like structured like comedy. Even
Mhm.
the plot of the movie is very comedic. Like I said, it's a comedy of errors, right? I mean, you could have the guy from Vacation.
Oh,
Chevy-
National
you could have,
Lampoons.
yeah, you could have Chevy Chase be the main character in this and like just put in a little more slapstick, and like it would fit right in with that, just in terms of like how the plot actually goes.
Yeah. When I
So-
was trying to compare it to something, because I was telling Johnny what movie we watched, I was like, Taxi Driver. Like I couldn't think of a movie that was comparable to it, and I was like, I guess Taxi Driver is another one of those. But again, Taxi Driver is depressing
Right.
and brutal, you know, from start to finish. And it's funny how they managed to do something kind of like Taxi Driver or Joker, but it's funny, you know. It's a way more relatable in some ways. you know.
Which I think is a testament to that, because at the end of the day, we all know that that Michael Foster is a deeply, deeply unhealthy person. But
Yeah.
his triggers are triggers for everybody that is living, you know, a middle class lifestyle in LA. Like,
Yeah.
he's just like, fuck off, fuck you. Like, I just want to. I mean, like several times he expresses, it's like, I just want to do the thing that I'm doing without being bothered or inconvenienced by people.
Yeah.
And there's even a scene where he's trying to get on the bus.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just like, fuck this, there's too many people, and like walks off. You know, it's like there's so many just little trivial first world problems that he experiences, and they only serve to make him like feel more and more justified in how he's behaving that day. Which is funny, because I mean, I think it really does do a good job of making you actually care about the main character, as opposed to if he was just, you know, an asshole from start to finish and mentally unwell from start to finish. Because it's, I mean, we have Prendergast to identify with, and if, like, you know, it could very easily have just been like, yeah, this guy's bad, and this is kind of a Lethal Weapon situation where like every time he's on screen we're like, fuck you, you're the bad guy, I know you're the bad guy. And then I want to see Prendergast, you know, having like a heart to heart with that with his partner, and care more about his story. I don't think this really was Prendergast's story. I think it was more so Michael Foster's story, except he is clearly the antagonist of it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's an interesting format, actually.
Which is why it's important for Prendergast to exist, because if you had, like, again, we're comparing it to Joker, where the main character of the movie is essentially the antagonist, and Joker didn't have that. They didn't have a Prendergast. There's a couple of people that were kind of, you know, they weren't bad or bad influences on him, and they didn't really like negatively impact him, but they didn't positively impact the story either.
No.
Like, there's
Certainly
nobody.
not a real protagonist.
Yeah, there's nobody. And so Falling Down has that, where they have somebody who's actually like, who's good, and it's like his last day on the job, and so he wants to actually be a cop again, so he does cop things. And you like watching that, and he deals with some minor inconveniences too.
He deals with a few of them, in fact. Like, I think that's the whole, I mean, that's the reason that they're foils to each other, right? Is that like Prendergast like experiences just as many annoying things that he has to deal with in his day-to-day immediately. Like, it starts off with him opening his desk drawer, and it's been filled with beach sand by his asshole coworkers.
They are assholes.
They are so mean to him. It's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Especially the douchebag character, you know, who's like a womanizer and
right
and whatever, who gets his comeuppance. I mean, like, Prendergast isn't like, his hands aren't clean. Like, he fucking punches that dude in the face. Like, he has his own moment of catharsis. But, you know, I guess he doesn't go off the deep end. And so and even like with his wife, who is making him unhappy, like there's the whole scene where he like puts his foot down with her and is like, you know, shut up, just like, I'm doing my job, this is what I'm, you know, he like sets boundaries with his wife in probably an appropriate way in the moment. Like, he definitely got emotional, but you know, I think you could tell that they had a healthy relationship, and they really did love each other. And so, like, the way that he handled that situation compared to how Foster is shown dealing with his wife when things aren't going his way, even that,
he threatens to kill her.
Like, yeah,
that's
you
a
know,
good point. Yeah,
very maybe
They're
not
both
so
frustrated.
subliminally. Yeah,
they're both frustrated middle class white dudes, you know, in LA in the 90s. And I think that's kind of the whole point of the final speech that he gives him, that Prendergast gives Foster, is essentially like, look, dude, we're all going through the shit, but like, you have decided that somehow like you're special, and you're not. So like, you need to fucking knock it off. You can see your daughter grow up. Like, do you want to see your daughter grow up or whatever, like the whole thing. And then obviously that whole thing too. I love the line where he's like, what the fuck were you planning on doing? And then Foster is like, well, I don't know. And Prendergast is like, it's always the same thing. I don't know. I know exactly what you were going to do. You're going to kill both of them and then think, oh, now I have no way out. I guess I'll turn this gun on myself. Like, don't act like you don't know. Like, don't lie to me like this, you know, be right. Like, respect me, you know, man to man, tell me the truth. I thought that like the whole exchange at the very end was a very good
Really good. Even when Michael Douglas is like, he has this moment of like, I think it's like a genuine like realization. He's like, I'm the bad guy.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And he's
yeah.
like, yeah,
yeah, man.
you are.
I love that. How did that happen?
How did that happen? Yeah.
Mhm.
I thought that was good.
Yeah, and so
Then both Pendergast and us get what we wanted for him, in that he says, "Well, now I've finally got to tell my wife that I'm still a cop,
right, which
Mhm.
implies that he's not going to
And
leave the force. I
that
assume.
he's not going to retire."
Yeah.
And
Is not going to Lake Havasu or wherever the hell.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, to look at cacti, not cactus.
I like that he's also like, people call Lake Havasu a vacation spot. It's really just a, what does he say?
Puddle
It's like
of mud or
it's
whatever.
really just a big
bowl
puddle of mud. That's how I feel about all lakes.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually such a nice cap at the end of the movie too, because it's the first time that Foster interacts with somebody that identifies, or that he identifies with. I think that's why Pendergrass actually was, successful in stopping him. Was because it's the first time that somebody was like empathizing with Foster in like a legitimate way that actually made sense, I think, to Foster. Obviously Michael Foster has gone off the deep end, much prior to the start of the movie, but at the very end, it's like he gets treated with some like legitimate like empathy and respect by the least likely person, who is his primary rival, even if he doesn't know it.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, it's cool. I mean, it feels good. It's a very rewarding romp, even though it's super lighthearted. The interactions between the characters are very well done and like a joy to watch. Even if there's a lot of tension in the interactions themselves.
Now, IMDb says that Michael Douglas considers this his favorite performance of all the movies he's been in.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting.
Interesting.
Because this is such a cult classic.
Yeah, Michael Douglas has been in a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
Yep.
For this to be his fave.
Yeah, and I don't think I've heard anybody talk about this movie except for my dad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it definitely for me was one of the movies. I watched this movie probably more than 10 years ago. So I've only seen it twice. I saw it then, and I saw it just recently for the podcast. And it has a very unique, well, I would say a feeling unique to that style of filmmaking in the 90s. Because what this movie reminds me of, and I wonder if you guys have heard about this movie too, is called The Substitute. Or maybe it's Substitute T-shirt, but do you know about this,
Substitute.
Doug? Substitute?
Yeah, Tom Berenger.
Tom Berenger, yeah. And it's a really dumb action movie. I mean, there's an undercover agent who goes undercover at a school in New York or something like that to infiltrate a drug ring.
Well, in the original movie, Tom Berenger is like a mercenary almost.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And his girlfriend is a teacher in a rough school, and some of the gang members rough her up, and so
I forgot
he
about that.
poses as a substitute teacher to find out what happened, and hilarity ensues.
Yeah.
They run around and he brings in his old team or whatever the team he usually works with, so that they could follow these gang members and do stuff like that. And who is it? Keith David is in that as the principal, and if I'm not mistaken, isn't that what's her name from this movie, Falling Down, as the girlfriend?
I don't know. I haven't seen that movie in such a long time, but that it has very similar feelings about it, which is where it's kind of there's humorous situations that they get into. I mean, it's kind of like a ridiculous concept, and then watching the movie, like it's a lot more serious. Like I think Substitute is rated R. It's the same thing as Falling Down, so there's gonna be those very mature moments in it, but still having a ridiculous premise. But that was a movie that was on Netflix one day, and I just kind of like threw it on, and I actually really enjoyed it, and it was like 1 a.m. But
it's actually good. It's not
and nobody knows
winning
about
any Oscars or anything like that, but it's one of those movies that if you go in without any expectations, it's it's one of those movies where it starts and ends kind of where you expect it, and you can get something fulfilling out of it, like this one,
Right.
where again, we're going through the entire movie and Prendergast is retiring, and I don't know about anybody else, but when I watch this film and I watch Prendergast go about his day, I'm like, why are you retiring? Don't retire. We don't want you to retire.
He's a good cop.
And
Right.
And it seems like when he reflects off of other cops, is they could really use somebody like him to continue being a police officer. It seems
Right.
to support that,
Yeah.
just because he's a good overall cop, even if he just like helped his partner or these other people to be better police officers themselves. And so that, to me, throughout the movie, is I'm rooting for him. And when you come to the end, that's fulfilling. And I think the other film you're talking about, The Substitute, is something similar. Is there are no twists, there are no shocks or anything like that. It's just good old fashioned fun. And
they're fun. Yeah, they're fun movies.
And again, they're full fun movies. I mean, one thing that's interesting about Falling Down is it's directed by Joel Schumacher. Better known for the crappy Batman movies, like the one where Arnold Schwarzenegger was Mr. Freeze, and
he did that right after this movie.
And he did those right after this film.
Yeah, like
oh really? I didn't realize
immediately afterwards. He did Falling Down, and then he
went immediately into Bat Nipples after this.
He did the Val Kilmer.
No, Bat Nipples was George
Clooney.
Yeah.
So he went immediately into Val
Was
Kilmer
it Batman Forever?
Which is Batman Forever, which is not quite Bat Nipples.
Tommy Lee Jones.
I thought Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze was Bat Nipples.
Bat Nipples is 90.
Yeah, that's Batman.
90,
it was 97, 98, something like that.
Oh, so he did I didn't realize that he did.
But he did. Yeah, he did the
Batman.
Val Kilmer Batman with Nicole Kidman and Tommy Lee Jones and.
And then they were like, that didn't do very well, so let's
do it again.
Joel Schumacher on, but replace the rest of the cast.
But it's an interesting flip from, because he's known more for those movies and less for this one.
What's funny about it is this movie is filmed really well. Like, it's really interesting to watch. There's a lot of really fun, cool shots. Like there's a couple that, like, I think of when he's first in the park, it like pans across the park where the gangland area, and then it like shows him and it's his face and he's like looking through the hole in his shoe. I thought that was a great shot. Or like there's one where the fly's like crawling up his neck at the beginning of the movie.
And they just show it for a split second and they
like little things like that.
It doesn't seem to me that there's a wasted shot. There's not a boring character. There's it's hard to believe that it's almost 2 hours long, but it's like an hour and 58 minutes or something, and
it doesn't feel nearly that long.
So it definitely doesn't drag.
And all the characters all the characters do feel good being in there, even though there's plenty of characters that are very clearly just like they're not extremely important. It's not following like this golden rule of like every single word of dialogue needs to be important, because I think there was a weird shift between, like, if you watch like 80s movies, like even Aliens, there's a lot of dialogue that is very much wasted because it's like people are just talking to each other a lot of the time.
Small talk.
See, I would say that's important.
Well, I mean, you could argue that it's important, but the dialogue is not important. The character interactions in that case would be important. There's a lot of just like dialogue that it could have been literally anything. And it's just like how the characters are talking that's important in 80s movies. You don't get that now. I mean, like I would be surprised to see a movie where people had small talk that was completely irrelevant to the plot these days. But this is like an interesting kind of in between, because there's plenty of interactions between characters that probably weren't super important, but at the same time, like, then these characters come back a little later, and it's like, establishing sort of like, okay, yeah, this person interacted with fucking white shirt with tie. Like, let's talk to like the girl, the girlfriend of the gang members.
Right.
And their mom is there, and her mom is like telling her not to talk to the cops, and it's like all that stuff. It's very interesting because it's not typical of if this were done today, I don't think that you would have those kinds of character interactions in the same way.
Mhm.
But like it's still entertaining, and it kind of works. It makes the movie feel a little bit more grounded, having these kinds of different interactions, like the interaction between the two gay guys and the store owner as well. It's like,
that one just cements, that this dude is a complete asshole before you even know he's a Nazi. You're like, yeah, well,
I was gonna say, well, you immediately find out that he's a Nazi, and you're just like, whoa, okay, sharp
No.
Well, and
turn.
according to that, but that also shows to the William Foster character's complete disassociation with any of that,
right.
because his most extreme reaction is to this guy with the most extreme reactions.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah.
He's talking about different races. He's obviously sort of
Homophobic.
accosting the gay couple that's in there and stuff like that. And again, as William Foster's character, or William Foster, has the most extreme reaction to this guy where he kills him.
Right. It's the first
Yeah.
time he kills somebody
And so
With the butterfly knife.
with the
Mhm.
butterfly
By
knife.
the way,
Mhm.
we were just having a conversation about butterfly knives
We were
a little while ago, and this movie prominently features a butterfly knife.
right to the shoulder.
Different times. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that whole scene where he takes a butterfly knife from a gang member, and the gang member like flips it open and is like, I've got
Yeah.
you now. And then the interaction happens. William Foster hits them with the bat, and they both run off in different directions. He picks up the butterfly knife and he's like flipping it. He's like, how did he do that? I love it. Just
Yeah.
like under his breath, like it's almost like
Yeah.
not even. He's just like, how
that's
it's like a
that's
little
that's
quick-
the other thing I like about this is his sort of weapons progression. He starts out
Mm.
with nothing, gets a bat, gets a knife, gets a bag of guns, and it just sort of
Yeah.
grows.
He
as
gets
the
a
movie
fucking
goes along.
bazooka. That's so
Bazooka,
funny.
Right.
yeah.
And then he gets combat boots. He gets a wardrobe change,
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
some point. It very much feels in that way like a video game, like you're
Mm.
playing Grand Theft Auto a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you sort of pick up the weapons from the people you vanquish,
They've definitely
Right.
been
Well, I mean,
vanquished.
it's
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's also like improv, right? Where it's like you constantly have to one up yourself, which is another comedy
Mm.
thing. Like it can't.
Yeah.
The movie is again one upping itself, just like you would need to in comedy, which is funny because it's not. I would not call this a comedy, but it like
It has
maybe
comedic
that's-
elements. I mean,
It has
there's
some
even that
elements
part where he
to it,
walks
yeah.
into the burger shop and he lays the bag of guns down on the counter, and you're just like, that's ridiculous. Like I'm
Yeah,
in.
that's-
I'm so in. So it's all great. I love the
or the
little
fact that he
things
doesn't
about
even
this.
react to the drive-by shooting. He's just on the phone.
Yeah,
they
and the
flip
No.
page.
Yeah, and the drive-by
And he
shooting
doesn't
is
even
great
move.
too, because it's very interesting that how he's the only person basically that doesn't get shot who's on the street.
And they're-
And he just
he's
kind
the
of like
one they're
turns
aiming
around.
for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
So
everybody
again,
else.
shows how ridiculous all that gang violence is, and just how like
How wanton.
Yeah,
it
and-
is,
and-
yeah.
ridiculous it is. So no, the movie makes a lot of really good small points about everything, and just like kind of
There is
you
a
know.
surprising amount of social commentary in the movie that is not necessarily related to William Foster being a mentally ill person,
Yeah.
which I mean I think honestly like makes the movie just a little bit forward thinking, especially for 1993. I don't think that the
Mhm.
political correctness movement really became a serious thing until kind of the late 90s. So it's interesting to see social commentary like that in a movie that's so old that's still kind of valid.
Mhm.
It's not. There's definitely inappropriate interactions between people, but it's not like the movie is implying that any of these things are acceptable. If anything, it's saying the opposite, which is pretty forward thinking, I guess. It's like it holds up, which is cool for a movie trying to make a point about something social, from what 25
Right.
years ago. Like,
mhm.
Almost 30.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I noticed that
that's
too.
one thing that I think it's Roger Ebert said about it. He pointed out that it was very interesting to have a movie where your white main character is the bad guy, and you're supporting what did he say? I think he just called him out by race, but like you're supporting Korean, Mexican, and references to the black guy who doesn't get alone in the beginning of the movie too. How they're more of like the sub characters that are also but the heroes of the story too. And then he says, and then you have your white people that are there, like the Prendergast character and stuff like that. But you have his detective, which is and she's Hispanic, and so you have a very interesting like array of races that are being represented, and they're all very accurate of what LA was and is, like even to this day. Like
No, they nail. I mean, I think they do a great job with the diversity of the film being kind of accurate to.
it almost feels like a
LA's
period
demographic.
piece, but done in the time of the time that the movie was made. Like it's
Pretty
very
much, yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's because of the Rodney King riots. You know,
And I think that had a lot to do with it.
I'm sure it
So I
did.
thought
Yeah.
they were
Probably.
filming it during those, because if you can probably still see them, is that they have shots of them shooting them, and you can see fires and stuff like that very close to a lot of the shots they were doing, outside shots they were doing. So
Yeah, it's an interesting time. So that's one thing I was that kept popping up too when I was watching it. Just recently, I was like, wow, this is. It feels like it's a period piece, kind of like poking fun at 1993 LA, but it was shot in 1993 LA. It's really
Well,
weird.
1992 LA, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah, it's impressive. I mean, it shows a lot of
You said forward thinking. I think that's a
forward thinking,
good
social
way to describe it, yeah.
consciousness, and like understanding kind of what people were feeling at the time, which I think
Mhm.
is
From Joel Schumacher.
from Joel
All
Schumacher
the
Yeah.
people.
of Batman fame. Like, no,
Yeah.
it is impressive. I don't know who wrote the script, but you know, they did a really good job capturing what I understand the 90s in LA to have been like in a very authentic,
Yeah.
earnest way, which is why it's surprising to me that this is just a cult classic. I mean, usually when something hits it so on the nose like that, to where it really captures that piece, people love it just for the fact that it is like authentic art. You know, like people are like, man, yeah, this is it. This is like this really feels like it. I mean, I think Daryl talks about that a lot. Like when something actually captures what the 80s felt like, you know, it's like, it's impressive.
Yeah.
So I would say the same for something that takes place in the 90s. It's also nice that it was filmed in the early 90s, though, because it doesn't have that. It wasn't filmed with digital. You can tell just based off of the fact that it's been up-resed compared to something that was shot in like 1999, like Fight Club, compared to this movie, looks like absolute shit.
Really?
think
I haven't seen Fight Club in a hot minute.
You think Fight Club looks? I'm not disagreeing or agreeing. I can't remember off the top of my head. You think Fight Club looks worse?
Yeah,
in terms-
definitely. I watched Fight Club pretty recently, and to my knowledge, it was filmed digitally, which is.
I know at first filming digitally was actually a almost a downgrade, because they didn't know how to correct as much as they did for film. I mean, they have film almost 100
Right.
years of experience working on film, and then they're switching to digital just because some people wanted to. And in a lot of those digital at first, what came out, and
Right.
some of them look kind of green and some of them look kind of blue, and
You know, it's
so
yeah, it's.
I
Funny
mean,
about,
we've definitely advanced since then to where digital looks fantastic, but it was not always so.
There's definitely a pocket of 90s movies that look bad because you can't up-res them since they were filmed digitally. There's no way to like
Anyway.
touch them up in the same way that you can, like, you know, up-res actual raw film. Like if you have the master of the film, then you can just you can make
Yeah,
it
you know,
look better.
I never thought about that, but like thinking back on Fight Club, it does have this weird like kind of. It's not grainy, but it's like this weird sort of blotchiness to it.
Right.
You know, that I guess that must be the digital thing.
Yeah,
But
you'll never be able to
looking-
get that. You'll never be able to get rid of that effect. Like,
No,
that's-
but you know, I never saw it that way until now. Like it's a problem. Like I always thought that was sort of a style, like and because it's a part of that pocket of movies that came out in the 90s. I always thought that was a 90s thing.
Mhm.
Like that was a 90s stylistic choice. Like, oh, we're doing this weird thing where stuff kind of looks splotchy, you know?
right.
Because so much I'm so far removed from it that when I look at those movies, I go, "Oh, that was a thing that they were doing. It was a trend."
Yeah, there's
Mm.
a
You know,
very
just like when you
interesting.
look at movies from like you know, we were talking about Twilight a while ago, and like everything looks freaking blue, or
Oh,
like you know, like
yeah.
um, there's a lot of
The
weird,
Matrix
you
is
know,
very green.
Very
Matrix is
green.
angular
very
camera
green.
angles in Twilight, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, in like the early 2000s, like or mid 2000s, and that was a trend or whatever,
Right.
but it wasn't a trend, like right? I mean,
Well, it
it
was just
actually
a
wasn't just a trend. It was
technological
like,
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it
per
was
se, it wasn't
people
a stylistic
learning how to deal with actually filming in digital, whereas before, I mean, almost everybody would film and film. They would convert to digital after the fact, and it
yeah,
made it look different.
right.
When you film in digital and you don't do that conversion process, and one of the reasons why they did was a lot of these uh, lighting directors and so forth, all the people having to do with the actual way something looks, they knew how to work film because they'd done it, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years. And so there was that experience that everybody could draw from is, oh, this is how we do this. This is how we make film look like this, look like this. And with digital, at least at first, not so much.
Yeah. I mean,
And
that's
Yeah.
why
so
we have.
there was kind of a resistance to filming in digital until such time
Mhm.
as the tools could catch up,
It's
the
been like the
hardware
last 10
could catch
years.
up. Yeah,
Like there were a
Yeah.
lot.
catch up
This.
to, and I mean, in you know those films in the '90s or in early 2000s even are a very good example of that.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go back
Where
and watch films from the early 2000s with CGI in them, and if they
Fight Club's a
weren't
great
handled,
example.
yeah,
Fight Club
Club's a
has some
great
shitty
example.
CGI.
Well, even like the first Harry Potter movie, you know, like
Mhm.
it's
First
really
couple.
funny. It's really
Mhm.
funny to watch them in like 4K and
Yeah.
like just be like, wow, the CG doesn't scale up to 4K. Like that
Nope.
shit's still like 1080 or
yeah, it's bad.
like, you know, 800 or whatever.
Well, it puts us in a weird spot though too, but we're kind of able to catch up in some regards and not others. I mean, that's the entire reason why the remaster for Lord of the Rings came out, is because at the time they had more experience colorizing film digitally. But now you could color the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy in your. I could do it on my computer, you know,
Right.
if I knew how to do it. And
Right.
so people are like, oh shit, well, we have the ability to re-release it for more money. Let's go ahead and remaster these bitches, and they
Yeah.
look great. That is the best I've ever seen those movies. I swear,
Yeah.
I swear, I swear. The
And there are
colors look
people
incredible.
people like you will watch the whole thing
I did,
all
I
over
did.
again.
But the interesting thing too
The
is that you
Danids of
could
the
watch.
world.
Oh, it's so great! It was. I was on cloud nine. But you could watch like the Avengers movies, the most recent one, Endgame, and the other one, and Infinity War. And then you can go and watch those same characters in their origin movie. Like if you go watch the first Iron Man movie, which is shot on film, it looks beautiful. It looks
Yeah,
so
it
good.
still looks
Yeah,
gorgeous.
Iron
it's
Man does
such
look
a
good.
gorgeous.
blows me away how good that
Transformers,
movie
the
still
first
looks.
Transformers movie looks insane. It's so
Yeah.
good. So I am definitely still a film holdout. Although I will say digital is getting really really fucking good at this point, but we just don't have anything that can mimic that film look, and it's just not possible to.
Well, I think it really just comes down to like, you know, what resolution does film actually capture in, right? Like it's significantly higher than well, it was for a long time than what digital could do.
Mhm.
Now I think digital is still,
that's just it. That's the problem. Is that there are no pixels in film. There are no real.
Yeah.
There is no resolution in film. I mean, they equate it to something digital so that they have
right.
something to compare to, but it doesn't really.
And
Yeah,
that's the tough
and
part.
I was talking to somebody years ago in a photography class, and he had this camera that was like the the film that it would expose to was like this big. It was these big blocks that were like canvas shaped. And he told me like what the he told me basically how much information he could capture with that camera, and it wasn't digital, it was analog. And it was basically just like the comparison to the DSLRs we had in the class at the time was hilarious. Like this analog camera
Right.
could capture way more depth of detail than any DSLR at the time.
Mhm.
and probably still to this day. And that's just, I mean, it's a testament to, analog stuff. Like when it comes down to resolution, analog is generally going to be a lot better because a lot of the times, the limit is like the size of atoms, right? I mean, I think that's why, like, it's the thing with vinyl, right? It's like the resolution of sound on vinyl is literally like down to the atom, compared to what we're able to do or reproduce with MP3s or even uncompressed files.
Right.
I think that in terms of like longevity, that's why movies from the 80s can still be up-resed and look really good. And then you compare it to something that was filmed in like 1996, which was a decade afterwards, and it looks like crap. It's because there's no film associated with it. It was a digital movie, especially
Mhm.
some of these direct to VHS movies. Like, not only
Oh,
is the
God.
cinematography bad, but also they didn't put it on film, and so like it just looks like shit all the way around.
Mhm.
Movies
Oof.
like Hackers, or the there's a movie that came out right after The Matrix that was supposed to be like in the same vein, and it just looks terrible. I forget what it's called, but yeah, there's a lot of movies from the 90s that you can find that just look like crap.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we were getting into that kind of weird territory too. And for the longest time, I said from like the mid 90s to early 2000s, not even going as back as far as the 80s, where you had a lot of like D movies coming out because they were cheaper. They were getting cheaper because of digital cameras. Like digital cameras were way cheaper than film, and you could operate them with a much smaller crew. And so now
Right.
you had these tiny little studios of like 5 people getting a bunch of actors together and going to shoot something. And it was way easier to make that stuff. And then it's now weird where we're getting to the point now too, where I have a cinema camera sitting right there
Yeah.
that takes images and video that is way, way better than anybody could in the 90s with a crew of 5 people, and I can do it by myself. And I'm using it to make documentaries.
Right.
They're not even movies, it's insane where we've come to that, like, and this is now we're just talking about technology, but like the fact that we've been able to progress so much, and where now digital is actually looking pretty fucking good because the images that I'm getting out of that are very filmic and very film quality because of the, again, Ben, you're talking about analog, the dynamic range that film can capture is, I mean, you can't really measure that as accurately as you could digital, but digital is, it's going to be a lot more compressed. So it's interesting that we're starting to get back around to that point where we can actually capture very high quality images and reproduce them in the same way that we could 40 years ago, which is really weird, back in the 70s and 80s on really nice film cameras. And we're kind of coming back around to that, but now instead of, like I said, 5 people, it's one person. It's really weird, but
Hmm.
Yeah.
it's like this weird cyclical thing with technology. So I don't know. I
But
just think it's funny.
yeah, but like back to the cinematography of the movie, um, the only thing I think that really gives it away is probably the choices that they do in color grading. I think feels very 90s aesthetic, but
It's very
also
warm.
like, yeah, there's also a lot of effects that they do with the cinematography that feels very 90s. There's a very like Little Rascals esque effect with the bazooka
I was
being
just gonna say
fired,
that
and
one.
the camera pans up and follows it down the sewer line. It doesn't actually follow the missile at all. It's just like, it's tracking where the missile should be
Right. Right.
underground.
Right.
Yeah,
And
they shot a bunch of smoke into the ground, and they're like, "Oh, there goes the missile," and they like pretend
yeah,
to
there it
move
is.
along with it.
And
Yeah,
like I mean, they literally could have put a piano effect where someone just ran their finger up the piano, because that's the effect that they use. It's
Yeah.
very clearly like this old school slapstick effect.
Yeah. But that's so in line with the movie. I feel like
Yeah,
when I
absolutely.
saw that,
Mhm.
I was looking at it. I'm looking at some of the costume designs in the movie, like even what the cholos are wearing, like the gangbangers. I'm like looking
That
at it.
single
It's like
button at
you
the
guys
top.
look like clowns. You look
Mhm.
like a caricature of what cholo gangbangers are
Well, a
supposed
big
to
thing
look like.
too is that they're wearing bright blue and bright red, which
Yeah,
is
and they're
not.
wearing
Mhm.
diametrically
Which you
opposing
would not do.
gang
They would not have been
colors.
best friends and wearing like two completely flagrantly different colors. Like
Mhm.
you don't dress that flamboyantly if you're not representing your colors, and like
Yeah,
bright blue and bright red, especially in LA, which I think they actually do use those colors to represent their gangs.
Oh yeah, it's
yeah.
very famous.
So
The Crips and the
Crips
Bloods.
and the Bloods. Yeah.
Yeah.
so like, and what's funny because that's an African American gang. And these guys are Latino.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, but like little stuff like that, I picked up on, but it didn't throw it off and make me think, oh, that's such a 90s thing. It almost felt like, well, maybe it was, but to me, it almost felt like part of that lighthearted thing. Like, we're not supposed to, we're not supposed to be like, shitting our pants looking at these really tough, scary gangbangers. It's not
And
really a moment like that,
yeah, I think that
you know?
most of these, I mean, even the Korean store owner, is I think they were more
Sure.
caricatures
Mhm.
of, they weren't supposed to go out and, hey, we're gonna represent specific gangbangers or certain types of people. Is I think it was more of a caricature
Yeah.
um, of
Yeah.
those types of people for the movie. You
Yeah.
know, and
Right.
it's
Yeah, and
I
they're
mean,
all very
even
one
Michael
dimensional.
Douglas is a caricature. I mean,
yeah,
he is a
absolutely.
straight up white collar worker with the crew cut haircut. It's interesting,
Yeah.
but you don't really. I don't know if you guys did, but I didn't pick up on it until I remembered the part where, like, when I was watching the movie again, and it says that he's lost his job. I was like, oh, his hair is a crew cut, but it's much larger than a normal, like, well kept crew cut would be. So it's kind of like your
Hasn't
first
had a haircut for maybe
a
a
couple
few
months.
weeks,
Yeah,
maybe a month or
Yeah.
so.
maybe a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
but I mean,
interesting to
by
watch
the
that.
same token, Robert Duvall's character is a caricature of a cop, a
Mhm.
retiring cop.
Hmm.
But still, and we've seen a lot of that.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, by the same token, all of his coworkers are caricatures of police officers. They don't really represent
Right. Like
an actual.
the douchebag cop is such a douchebag. Like he's
Mhm.
Yeah,
like he's over the top asshole.
Mhm.
Like yeah, he's supposed to be a caricature of an asshole cop.
Yeah. I think pretty much everybody in the movie is over the top except
Yeah,
for maybe the wife.
which is
Uh,
Yeah.
there's the that's the little bit of Joel Schumacher thing that you can kind of recognize. Characters who are a little
mm,
bit over the top.
yeah,
That's
that's
definitely a
true.
Schumacher thing. So I kind of see it. You know.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Y'all ready for
those are all
ratings?
of my yeah, I think those are
Yeah.
all my thoughts on the movie. I
Yeah.
think we can
Yep.
give our ratings.
I'll go first. I'll give this movie a 9. I do like this movie. I don't love this movie, but I do like it. But I give it a high rating because to take a little bit out of your book, Ben. This movie sets out to do something very specific, and it hits it out of the park. It does it almost perfectly. Like, I can't think of a decision that they could make to make this movie any better. The only reason I don't give it at a 10 because I don't love this movie. Like, it doesn't really like hold a special place in my heart, or like strike a specific chord with me or anything like that. I can't really identify with anything in the movie except for these little frustrations. So,
Mhm.
but watching the characters interact with each other, watching the characters deal with the things that they have to deal with, their own specific plot points, are done perfectly and non-wastefully, like Doug said. And I think it's just like a great. It has a great pacing too, and like also like Doug said, it's almost 2 hours long, but it doesn't feel like it.
Right.
So yeah, I would give this movie a 9. Um, yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I was glad we did it for the podcast. It's still good. Still holds up.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess I'll go next. I would give this movie probably a strong 7 to light 8. Uh, I think that yeah, you're right, Dana. It does hit it out of the park in a lot of ways. It's really great social commentary. It really feels like the '90s in LA. Even with the caricatures of people and things like that, it feels kind of authentic somehow.
Mhm.
Uh, I think is just a lot of little details, being nailed. So it's a testament to the writing and to the direction. I think the only thing that was challenging probably for me that kind of lowers it is just that Michael Foster's character, while I understand him, and definitely, I get the empathy that they're driving towards with these little things. I think a lot of his actual conversations with people were not as he doesn't really he has a hard time actually asserting what his feelings are uh, to the characters. That kind of made it feel a little weird to me. Like, I got the gist of it, but I wish that he had just the specific dialogue between him and his interactions with people. I wish that he was able to make his point a little bit better in a
Mhm.
lot of those cases. Um, and I think that would have made it hit a lot harder if he had, as opposed to just seeming kind of like a rambling mess. But maybe that was intentional too, and it just didn't. It's just not the direction that I wanted to see from that character. I wish that like he when he was shouting at people that he was making really good points, but it felt a lot of the time when he was shouting at people, he was just kind of rambling, and of course people are going to think he's crazy. So that's the only thing I think holds back on the experience of being with Michael Foster, specifically because it made me relate to him less and think of him more as a crazy asshole, and kind of, you know, roll my eyes at like him saying stupid shit. Like, okay, dude. I wish he was just a little bit more coherent. That's all. So yeah, strong 7, light 8 for me.
Yeah, I'll give it. I like this movie a lot. It was a lot of fun to watch. I'd give it a solid 8. Solid 8. And this is a movie I could see myself rewatching, for sure. The Robert Duvall character was like, I really enjoyed him. I always thought of this movie as a Michael Douglas movie, and I didn't realize Robert Duvall was in this, but he was actually, every scene with him is really fun and interesting too. He's a likable guy. So I would watch this movie again, and I would definitely recommend it to people. I kind of get what you're saying, Ben. I think that like sometimes he has really funny, interesting points, like when he's talking about the burger, and he's like, "What, you see this thing, this smashed sorry thing? Like, why do you make it look like that up there?" And then I get the burger, you know. And so like every now and again, his points are really funny and relatable and well thought out. And sometimes he is just like rambling and kind of just being, you know, his things are too broad, you know, he's just kind of being this rambling crazy guy. But no, overall I really liked it. It was a lot of fun, and it didn't feel like a 2-hour movie. So yeah, I'll give it an 8. Solid 8.
Doug?
Me, I'm kind of torn, but I'll probably give it a 9. Is like you, is that I don't love it. I mean, mechanically, it's a great film. I don't see any down parts. As far as him being coherent, I just think if his every argument was coherent, he wouldn't be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He'd be a well understood.
Yeah.
He'd be too sympathetic, probably.
And so the movie can happen.
And so I think the crazy is thrown because we need to remember that ultimately we have to root for Robert Duvall's character, and we have to watch, spoiler alert, Michael Douglas's character die.
Right.
And so I think those moments, that while, you know, there's a moment where he cut his hand and he holds the little girl's hand and thinks he hurt her.
Yeah.
Right.
And, you know, that's very relatable. But by the same token, you know, when he's yelling at the golfers,
a
little less coherent. But like I said, that I think that shift helps us as the audience, as we progress, to let the Michael Douglas character go. And, so I guess, and I would probably not give it a 10 on the same way, as this is not a top 10 film for me. Is most of the characters, for me, this film is, I'm standing on the sideline and there's no real character I can 100% get behind. So it's sort of it is almost like a documentary of sorts. So it's kind of hard for me to firmly plant behind anything it's saying or anything it's doing. Like I said, to me it's nearly perfect, but and I can't point a finger at anything it's doing wrong specifically. It's just that and it does what it's supposed to. It's just that, like I said, I don't like Dan, and I just don't. Love's not a word I would I love a lot of movies, but love's not a word I would put behind this one.
Yeah. So still good though. All right. Well, yeah, those are the ratings. So I was just thinking though too, for the next movie that we are gonna do. You guys have any suggestions?
I already made my suggestion.
I do
we should
as
do.
well.
Wait, what was it?
Well, my suggestion was Inside. The
Bo
Burnham
Burnham
special.
Okay.
I think that would be, well, a lot of people. It really resonates with a lot of people, with a lot of millennials specifically. I think for a very good reason. But I think with, you know, Doug and Daryl, having a chance to hear their perspective on this special would also be really, really interesting. because from my perspective, I think it captures. It's actually a lot like what we said about this movie. I think it captures the sentiment that a lot of people felt in 2020 very well. So I think it could be a very interesting one to talk about, especially because it's relevant right now.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
watch it already then?
Did I?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Okay.
I
Check it
enjoyed
out.
it. I liked it a lot. Even
Okay.
if we don't
It's only
do it
an
for the
hour, right?
podcast. It's an hour and 20, I think.
Hour and 20. Yeah.
I could do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I
Be-
was gonna say, A Quiet Place Part 2 is
Mm.
really good.
Yeah, I want to watch that.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters, and a lot of movies coming out right now honestly have just sucked so bad. This was
Yeah,
yeah.
Actually,
such a refreshing, good movie that I really enjoyed and was fun. Fun little thriller. So
Mhm.
I need to
yeah,
watch A Quiet
Quiet Place
Place
Part 2.
1. So I
Oh
gotta
shit,
watch
you
Oh,
do.
that's-
That
I
is a
watched
good.
it I just watched it a couple of weeks ago. It's surprisingly good. I mean, I didn't.
yeah, and
It's
the
really good.
first one's really good too.
Mhm.
John
very good.
Krasinski, man, what the heck?
Yeah,
Why is
that's
he
his
such
first
a good director?
movie he directed.
This is his first movie that he's directed.
Insane.
Really? Oh wow. I
Where'd
didn't
he
know that.
come from?
Yeah, I
Where the heck
know.
did he come from?
Crazy.
Playing, Jim on The Office, and turns out he's a really good director.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we could do Inside for the next one because that'll be easy.
Yeah.
This is gonna be the next one that we do before we go to Colorado, so I'm down for something easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, something
yeah,
quick.
hour and 20.
So yeah. All right. Well, there you go. That's falling down. So for our Instagrams and stuff like that, Instagram is WLT Podcast. You can follow us there. Also, our Discord is down below. You can click the link and join our Discord, where you can see where we post the next movies when I remember it. But yeah, every Tuesday at 7:30 Central, 5:30 Pacific time, and we'll see you guys next week.